All right, so, you sent over this lecture, The Philosophy of Computation, meaning mechanism mystery. And honestly, it kind of blew my mind. Like, we use computers every day, but when was the last time you stopped and really thought, what is computation, really?
It's one of those things, isn't it? We take it for granted. But the more you dig into it, the more you realize just how deep that rabbit hole goes.
Exactly. And Brian Cantwell Smith, the guy who gave this lecture, he basically says all of our current theories of computation are, well, wrong.
He forces us to confront those assumptions we didn't even know we had.
Okay, so before we get too far down the rabbit hole, can we back up a bit? What are these dominant theories of computation that Smith has a problem with?
Sure, so Smith identifies four main contenders: formal symbol manipulation, Turing machines, information processing, and digitality. Now, these aren't just arbitrary categories. They profoundly shaped how we understand computation, and even intelligence itself. But Smith argues they all fall short when it comes to capturing the full picture. See, Smith argues that to really grasp computation, we need to move beyond these neat, self-contained theories and embrace what he calls computation in the wild.
Computation in the wild. Okay, now you're just messing with me. What does that even mean?
He's talking about the messy reality of how computation actually happens, how meaning and mechanism are always intertwined. And that's where our second source comes in this interview with Dr. Dennis Waters.
Oh, yeah, the one where he talked about one-dimensional information. I'll admit, I had to look up like half the words he used.
He can be a bit dense, but he's brilliant. And he offers a really helpful framework for understanding this whole meaning mechanism interplay. It builds on the work of Howard Patti, who argued that there's this crucial divide between the physical world and the world of symbols, the world of meaning. He called it the epistemic cut.
Epistemic cut. See, this is what I'm talking about. It sounds like something you'd need a philosophy degree to understand.
It's simpler than it sounds. Imagine like this chasm separating the raw existence of things from how we represent and understand them. That's the epistemic cut. On one side, you've got physical processes unfolding, the nuts and bolts of reality. On the other side, you've got symbols, language, concepts, the tools we use to make sense of it all.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. So how does this cut relate to computers? Aren't they already in the world of symbols and information?
That's exactly the point Waters is making. Computers, as we currently build them, are kind of stuck on that one side of the epistemic cut. They excel at manipulating symbols, but they struggle with the kind of embodied, nuanced meaning that humans navigate so effortlessly.
Can you give me an example? I'm a bit of a concrete thinker.
Sure. Think about taking a driving test. There's the written part, right? Where you answer questions about traffic laws. And then there's the actual driving part.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. The written test is all about knowing the rules, the symbols. But the actual driving, that's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak.
Exactly. The written test is largely rate independent, meaning it doesn't really matter how fast you finish it as long as you get the answers right. But the driving test, that's rate dependent. You can't just speed through a stop sign and expect everything to be fine, right?
Definitely not. So you're saying computers are kind of like stuck in that written test mode. They can process symbols really fast, but they don't really get the whole real-time, messy reality thing.
Exactly. And that's the challenge for AI. How do you bridge that epistemic cut? How do you get a machine to understand meaning in that embodied, context-dependent way that we humans do? Remember that example Waters gave about saying yes while shaking your head no?
Yeah, that was a good one. Like, a human would instantly get the irony, the subtext, but a computer would probably just get stuck on the literal yes, right?
Precisely. Because it lacks that connection to the physicality of communication, the way meaning can be layered and nuanced. And to address this, Waters proposes these three grammars that he thinks are essential for any system, biological or artificial, to truly understand and interact with the world: interaction, extension, and abstraction.
Okay, let's break those down, because honestly, the word grammar just makes me think of like diagramming sentences in high school. Not exactly my favorite thing.
Fair enough. But think of these grammars as like the building blocks of meaning making. The first one, interaction, is all about the interplay of nouns and verbs, objects and actions. It's the foundation of how we, as embodied beings, experience the world. We perceive objects and we act on them.
So it's not just about knowing what things are, but how they relate to each other, how we interact with them.
Exactly. And it might seem basic, but this interaction, this back and forth between us and the world, is where meaning starts to emerge. It's like, think about the difference between reading a recipe and actually cooking a meal. The recipe is just symbols on a page until you start, chopping vegetables, mixing ingredients, feeling the heat of the stove.
It's making those symbols real, bringing them to life through action.
Exactly. But we don't just interact with the here and now, right? We think about the past, the future, hypothetical situations. And that's where the grammar of extension comes in. This allows us to break free from that immediate context to talk about things that aren't physically present.
We use language to extend our reach beyond the immediate, right? Like, I can talk about a vacation I took last year or a movie I want to see next week.
Exactly. And we use all these linguistic tools to do this, prepositions, modals, tenses, to create this whole universe of meaning that extends far beyond our immediate sensory experience. It's our language evolving to encompass not just what is, but what could be and what might have been.
Okay, I'm digging this. So we've got interaction, we've got extension. What about the third grammar? Abstraction. That one sounds kind of intimidating.
It's the trickiest one, for sure. This is where we get into the realm of concepts that don't have a direct physical counterpart. Ideas like freedom, justice, even computation itself.
Big ideas. We're getting philosophical here.
We are. But these abstract concepts are incredibly powerful, right? They shape our values, our societies, our understanding of ourselves. And this is where things get really interesting and really challenging for AI. Because if even we struggle to define these abstract notions, how can we possibly program a machine to understand them?
It's like you can't just point to freedom or justice in the real world, right? They're these kind of fuzzy, subjective concepts. So how do you teach that to a computer? Or is that even possible? It's almost like there's this missing layer of experience, right? Like, how can a machine truly grasp justice if it's never experienced injustice, or even like the concept of fairness in any meaningful way?
You've hit on a really crucial point. See, biological cognition, the kind that we humans have, it's deeply, deeply historical. Our brains are the product of billions of years of evolution, of interacting with the world through our senses, making mistakes, learning from them. It's messy, it's chaotic, but it gives us this incredibly rich foundation for understanding abstract concepts.
We've had eons to figure this stuff out, and even we don't always get it right.
Exactly. And software, on the other hand, it's largely ahistorical. We design it, we program it, we try to shortcut that whole messy evolutionary process, and that has huge implications for what AI can and can't do.
So where does that leave something like GPT-4? I mean, it can write poetry, it can generate code, it can even hold conversations that feel, honestly, kind of spooky sometimes. Is it breaking through those limitations?
GPT-4 is undeniably impressive, and it's easy to get caught up in the hype. And it does some things incredibly well. It can mimic the patterns of human language with stunning accuracy. But does it really understand the concepts it's manipulating? Or is it more like an incredibly sophisticated parrot?
A parrot. Okay, I'm intrigued.
Think about it. A parrot can learn to repeat words and phrases, even string them together in ways that sound meaningful. But it doesn't necessarily grasp the underlying concepts, right? It's just mimicking what it's heard.
Okay, that's a little unsettling. So you're saying GPT-4 might be able to generate a sonnet about love and loss, but it doesn't actually feel those things. It's just rearranging words in a way that sounds right.
It's a bit of a philosophical debate, but that's the crux of the grounding problem. GPT-4 can create grammatically flawless sentences, even beautiful ones, profound ones. But without a body, without the ability to interact with the world directly, its grasp of abstraction remains fundamentally limited.
It's like those deep fake videos. They can create incredibly realistic depictions of people, but there's no one home, right? No actual consciousness behind those simulated eyes.
Precisely. And that's not to say that GPT-4 isn't useful, that it doesn't have incredible potential. But we need to be mindful of these limitations, both in how we develop AI and how we talk about it.
So where do we go from here? If even something as advanced as GPT-4 struggles with these basic things, is the whole quest for general intelligence kind of misguided?
It might be more helpful to think of intelligence as a spectrum rather than this single destination, you know? Even we humans, who we consider to be intelligent, we specialize. A brilliant physicist might not be able to bake a cake to save their life, and that's okay.
So instead of trying to create an AI that can do everything, we should focus on AI that can do specific things incredibly well while acknowledging its limitations.
That's a great way to put it. It's not about diminishing the power of computation or giving up on the pursuit of artificial intelligence. It's about understanding its true nature, recognizing both its strengths and its limitations.
It's about working with these technologies, not trying to replace ourselves with them.
Exactly. And who knows what incredible discoveries await us when we let go of this narrow view of computation as something separate from or superior to ourselves.
It's like we've been so focused on finding the special sauce of computation that we've overlooked the specialness of our own messy, embodied, historically grounded intelligence.
And maybe, just maybe, letting go of that quest for a single unifying theory of computation might unlock even more profound insights into the nature of thought, of meaning, of consciousness itself. Who knows?
Wow, well, that's a pretty mind-blowing thought to end on. I'm going to need some time to process all of this. To all of you listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back with another episode exploring the edges of technology, philosophy, and everything in between. Until then, keep those brain cells firing.